Hello friends. How are you doing today? My name is Mary and this is Happily Ever Esch. Today I have kind of an interesting video. It was more of a spur of the moment video, if you will. I had someone message me on Goodreads and they asked me for a book that I love to get people to read. And I thought that was a really interesting question. Not just a book recommendation, not just a book that you love, but a book that you love to convince other people to read. And it was just a very interesting kind of little thought journey I went through, because that's not just a book that appeals to me. It would be a book that I think more people should read, or everyone should read. So a book that fundamentally is going to potentially make you a more empathetic person, change your thought process. And I think that's different than just a good book that I enjoy. And I really enjoyed just kind of thinking through this, because not only does it need to be good, empathetic book, a book that kind of changes your thought perception, and it also needs to be readable and enjoyable, or people aren't going to pick it up. And I'm especially thinking people who maybe don't read that much, who don't have a ton of time to read, who maybe only read a couple books a year. Like, they're really going to want to give their time to a book that's engaging and enjoyable. So this little thought process kind of got me thinking, and I'm like, that is a wonderful booktube video idea. So here we are, and I'm going to share 5 books that I would love for you and others to read. So books that I would love to convince you to read. Now, 4 of these books I don't own, and so I haven't chatted about them as much on my channel, just because I don't have them physically with me to show and pull for different tags and things. But kind of going through my reading in the last couple years, these are definitely standout titles. And if you enjoy this video, I definitely want to do it again. I think it's such an interesting concept. So I'm going to start from the older books that I read. So I think this last one I read in 2017, and then we'll work our way up until the most recent one I read. So yes, 5 books I would love to convince you to read. The first one of those is Evicted by Matthew Desmond. This is a work of narrative nonfiction. It's focusing on one city, I believe in Wisconsin, don't quote me, but I believe the author is focusing on a city in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, I think. And he's looking at basically the housing market, and in particular how renting kind of works in this community. He follows and talks to landlords and to people who rent homes. He also follows a trailer park and kind of renting of the space and of trailers. I think that this book opens up a great and interesting conversation about housing in America, how it works, what works well, more what doesn't work well, kind of the laws we have, who they protect, why it is the way it is. But he also humanizes this conversation because he's delving into the lives of the people that he's interacting with. So it's not just like an interview. He goes to these places, is living with these individuals. At times kind of does insert himself into the story because he's so intimately wrapped up in these people's lives. But I think that you should read it because it offers a very timely and interesting conversation about housing in America, and I think even more so timely now when we're in a economic state that's unstable right now, and kind of thinking of those who are the most vulnerable in our society, and in particular what the vulnerabilities in our housing market. So that's reason 1. Reason 2, the narrative nonfiction style. It's so compellingly readable. The audiobook was phenomenal, and Matthew Desmond just is such an empathetic and kind and very smart individual. I also love at the end, he gives some real policy changes that could happen, and I love that. It's not just here's the problem, figure it out. It's here's the problem, and also here's some really good solutions and ways to advocate for change in our communities. And really the scope of his work is so interesting and engaging, because he's looking at one topic, which is housing and the renting market, but he's looking at it from lots of different perspectives, and I really appreciated that. And also Matthew Desmond is a doctor of sociology, so he's a really smart and qualified person to be telling these people's stories and really the story of the housing market in the United States. All right, I hope you read that one. One of the best nonfiction books I've ever read, and I'm happy to get to share it here. And if you have read it, let's chat. And if you read it because of this video, I would love to chat with you because it's probably my top recommendation. It's a fabulous book that I think everyone should read. Next, we have a graphic memoir, and I said that these were in order, but really I just know Evicted was the one that I read a couple years ago. The rest, these next couple might have gotten a little muddled, but I read them around the same time. Anyway, Good Talk by Mira Jacob. This is a graphic memoir, and she was provoked to write this book after Donald Trump was elected to be president of the United States. It's her reckoning with race in America, but it's also her looking back on her life, how she has been perceived because of the color of her skin, but also how she's perceived others because of the color of their skin. It's such an honest look and kind of reckoning through our bias and our prejudice and why we have those feelings, hold those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions. She does such a compelling job of telling her story, and I love the alternating timelines. It's not linear. She jumps around. That's my favorite way to tell a story because I think we can connect all of these different moments in such an interesting way, and in a story you can do that. Why not play with the timeline? So I love the way she does that. It very much felt like a person trying to figure it out. She gives these moments of conversations with her son, conversations with her husband, conversations with friends, looking back on conversations with peers and with her parents and with other family members, and it was just stunning. It just felt like how I feel sometimes going through why we think the things that we do, what's shaped us, and she does it in such a compelling way. I am not a graphic novel memoir kind of person, so for this book to make the impact that it did is kind of amazing. I think that this would appeal to a lot of audience. There is adult content in it, so I want to let that be known. There's like some nudity and there's drawings, so please be aware there is adult content in the book, but nothing that distracted from the story. It all felt very purposeful in the novel. I really loved that I felt like the main message was also like having grace with others, even when we disagree, but also still, you know, having conviction and knowing what is right and what is wrong, but also dealing with other people as they're going through these kind of same thought processes that we all do. So, highly recommend. Go pick up that book and let's chat about it if you've read it as well. All right, more nonfiction. I told you we're on a nonfiction kick. The next is another memoir. Again, I don't read a ton of memoirs. I don't tend to like super enjoy memoirs, but this one, I think I do like memoirs. I just don't typically maybe like famous people's memoirs, so maybe that's where I should kind of preface that. But anyway, it's All You Can Ever Know by Nicole Chung, I believe. I'll put her name here. I didn't write it down because I was not prepared for this. Nicole is telling her story and experience of her adoption. She was adopted as a baby by a family, and it's her experience of interracial adoption. This story, and kind of I think the main point, is that adoption isn't always good and it isn't always bad. There's a lot of gray in adoption, and she's telling her story for what it is and being kind of brutally honest. So much love and compassion for her adopted parents, but it's also not sugarcoating the struggles that she went through because of her adoption. And I so very much appreciated that. As someone who works in the foster care field, I work very closely with adoption, and I know it to be such a nuanced topic. And so I so appreciated the way that she was able to share her story. And there were things that made me uncomfortable. There were things that kind of pushed against my own notions, but being able to sit with her story and think about it and just really kind of be entwined with it was such an important thing for me to do in my work. I obviously think that there's been a lot of growth in the discussion of adoption and how we as a society kind of talk about it, and the trainings and things that goes for people who are adoptive parents, also foster parents. And so I do think there's been a lot of growth from Nicole's like perspective, but that doesn't mean there isn't more to go. And so I definitely felt like her voice was one which was so impactful for me. So I definitely highly recommend for anyone to kind of reckon with this, because it's not just dealing with adoption, it's also dealing with her identity as an Asian American and the racism that she experienced. There's a lot of other societal issues going into this. And so I definitely think it's just a really important to listen to those voices, and this was yeah, just a really interesting and good reading experience for me. Again, probably one of the hardest books that I read here, just because of my own assumptions that were challenged and pushed a little bit, but nonetheless a voice that I think needs to be heard and shared. And so that's why I think that more people, or you, should read this book, because I think it's an important perspective to listen to and hear from. All right, probably one that maybe doesn't have as broad appeal, but really I just want more people to know about her, and that's the biography, The Woman Behind the New Deal. This is all about Frances Perkins, who was in the cabinet with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This book was phenomenal, mostly just because Frances Perkins put a stamp on my heart. She is the embodiment of strong female character, except she's not a character, she's a real person, and I want to be a role model for all young children. I love learning more about her story, the mundane parts, the amazing parts. It was just a wonderful look into her life. I don't read a lot of biographies, so I don't really know to say if this is well written or not. A lot of times it felt like there was lots of information kind of shoved in there, and I was like, is this even necessary? But just to learn more about Frances Perkins was such a joy, and all of her contributions that we still feel today in our society, whether that's the 40-hour work week or safety conditions in buildings that we go into, or child labor laws. She has really put her mark on the United States as we know it. She was tenacious and strong, but also a very private and loving person as well. I just adored learning about her, and I think more people should know about Miss Frances Perkins. So I highly recommend, if not reading that book, at least going and learning some more about her, because she was a remarkable woman, and that book was a joy to learn more about her. All right, last but certainly not least, the only fiction book, and also the only book I own, and that's The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. I just read this one last month, so you've probably potentially heard me chat about this and lots of other people's. It's a very much beloved middle grade novel, but why I chose this one was because of the look at childhood trauma. Ada, our main character, was born with club feet, and because of this, her mother is horribly and terribly abusive and does not allow her really interaction with any other people outside of the mom and her young brother. This is set during World War II. And all of the children living in London are sent to the countryside for protection, but Ada's mother's not going to let her go. But Ada ends up escaping with her brother, and they make it to the countryside to live with a woman who doesn't want to take any kids in, but is forced to. And this is all about the woman, Susan, who takes these children in, but also about these children and the healing that they go through. But again, the look at childhood trauma in this was phenomenal. I think such an important discussion, not only for parents, not only for young children, but also for parents and grandparents and lots of people alike. I just loved watching Ada and just seeing her struggles, seeing her overcome them, and really seeing the resiliency that family and security and love brings, and the healing. Such an important book, such a great read, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it, and I highly, highly, highly hope that I or someone else has convinced you to read this book, because it's phenomenal. All right, so that's it. Those are the 5 books I would love to convince you to read. I'd love to know what's on your list. What do you want other people to read and why? Let's chat about it down in the comments below. If you have any questions or any thoughts on these books, let's also chat about that down in the comments below. I'd love to know if you have different opinions on my thoughts and think, no way, I don't think anyone should read that book. Let's discuss. Thanks so much for watching. Please like if you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more bookish videos. I post usually weekly. I'd love to have you here. It's a fun bookish time on this little corner of the internet. I'm also trying to be more active on my Bookstagram. It's also linked down below, but it's the same handle name at Happily Ever Esch. All right, friends, thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.